though I'm orienting everything towards the no-self, which again just simply means the emptying out of the images that are held in time and space, that are karmically present in the body-mind structure, family patterns that are held in the body-mind structure. And as I've talked about, for most of us, it takes a while. It isn't something that just happens overnight. And all of the practices are developed in many ways, not in totality, of course, as this transformative current, this transformative power that comes through and then brings the distortion and the identity and the misunderstanding that you are diminished or enhanced by memories that are held from the past. And we usually carry both. We always think about we're the poor victim, that has to work through things, but we also have a tremendous amount of self-arrogance and all sorts of ideas about ourselves that also are to be freed. It's the other side of the coin. It's just often when there's not a lot of recognition of who you are and the power of who you are, because power simply is opening to the totality of who you are, not too much, not too loose, not too tight, not too loose. So when that has been devoted to, and it takes a tremendous amount of vigilance, honesty, radical self-honesty, courage, heart, willingness to just go through it over and over and over. And all of those places that you just simply were not able or capable of opening to make conscious and then to let go. It's an act of great heroic heart courage. Heart and courage are the same words. So after that period of time, once in a while you'll see someone that blasts it pretty much all in one blast, but that's extraordinarily rare. Usually it takes over a period of decades, frankly. And I think the younger generation are doing it much faster, just simply because the collective is thinner, if you want to call it that, right? It's not so dense and unconscious. In my mother's generation, there wasn't even an option of working through or dealing or transforming anything. And in my generation, that's when it started to come forward that there actually was a possibility that you could work through and transmute and transform, though there was still a strong, I would say, misunderstanding that then you just had to sort of manage what it was that you've discovered about yourself. And that's where, sexual abuse was like, I'm a survivor. Or, you've had all this happen to you and you were willing to look at it and be with it. But it created a pretty deep, in most cases, a pretty deep psychological identity. And then you learn techniques and ways of dealing with it. At this junction, at this time, there's a sort of a transparency that's available, and that truly is for all of the devotion and the work and the transformation that the generations before you have gone through. And so I encourage to really get that and have a deep sense of gratitude, just as, this generation is on the knees to all of those that have before us created that transformation and that transparency that continues. And again, I know I've spoke of it often, but the babies that are coming through are just stunning. I can't believe it, some of the ones that I've met. So again, they are coming through because of the work of this generation that has willingly gone through the hell realms. They're very, 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 very painful in most cases. So then there just simply is and I would say it's one of, not the last doorway, but perhaps the later doorway, and that is the sense of interconnectedness. And though it is one of the main teachings of Buddha, and I would say Jesus, but he just describes it differently. He calls it, love. But it's that same recognition that there is no one and no thing that we are not interconnected with. And I mean interconnected in the most primordial root ground of our nature. We all are birthed from that same womb, that same ground. And then as it arises and forms itself into the myriad of images and forms, which we are those images and form, that is love, the luminosity, the dynamic aspect of silence. So we are made up of the same root, and we are formed by the same substance. And so that is the interconnectedness. It cannot be otherwise. And it has nothing to do with some people that you like and resonate with and some people that you don't. I mean, you can be drawn to, or you can be pulled away just in your conscious interaction. But it has nothing to do with you are not a part of. I think it's vital right now that we come into that recognition, because we're coming in probably, and historically, who knows, but it feels like probably one of the most divisive times upon the planet. And it isn't that, one's right and one's wrong. It's that sort of, I don't know, not a part of it. It's almost like as the light of consciousness is arising, then the shadow, just like in our own unfolding, the more we became awake to the light of our own nature, the more those deep patterns were exposed and brought forward. And so it's the same in this collective earth. This light, it's just time, is just pouring into the planet. It's just pouring into the planet. And it's blowing all sorts of, scientific machines, and they don't quite know even what's happening. They just know that it's showing up in their technology, this increase. So this time of extreme appears, polarities, in one way is profoundly interconnected, because it's the light and the burst of consciousness that is pouring forth and freeing up, transforming the shadow. But it can be overwhelming. I mean, there's no one within this room that have not had times of really overwhelm. It's just almost too much, how can you handle it? It's coming into your nervous system with this incredible impact, and it's hitting the whole cellular system. And many people are having quite a lot of physical adjustments because of it. And allowing that and not being taken over by these physical adjustments, and they can be quite fierce. I don't have to tell a lot of you how fierce they can be. But at the same time, if you have a recognition and an understanding of actually what's happening, then it becomes, you can sort of open to it and be curious about it and listen to the changes and the guidance that are coming into your life. So this emptying out then allows the basic reality to be recognized, not a spiritual concept, but to actually be recognized as the interconnected. And here, the interconnected and compassion is all one presence, right? That's when the true compassion, not being a nice spiritual person, that's attempting compassion. You know, I certainly have tried that and failed repeatedly, still do fail repeatedly. But it's the understanding of that we are all interconnected. We are of the kinship. And we are all made up of one another. And though we're totally unique and we get to dance as we dance, and that's the part of the human experience, it is not in any way that we are separate from and cannot be. Now that's not to say that maybe you're going to hang out with someone and interact with someone who is denying life, you know, who is opening to the deathing, to the tearing down, to the destructing, to the dark. And I mean the no light, dark, meaning no illumination. And many of us have had our own dance with that, you know, where we've hung out with different people, or we've been drawn to different relationships or different activities. And, you know, it has really deteriorated the life force rather than enhance and build the life force. So you give that if you run into someone that is diminishing this being, then it's blessing and understanding if you can do that. And then, you know, it's kind of like a repelling, but not out of a negativity or, you know what I'm saying? You're not denying that that too lives within the one. And I am the one. So that too lives in this life force. Most challenging for most of us, and maybe we've limited ourselves in looking in a pretty narrow view. Because if you look in the big view, you start looking at those that are in war, and those that are experiencing famine, and those that are experiencing, you know, maybe gonna push the button. You know, you look in the real big view. And I don't have that view. I know some that do. I think perhaps maybe Ani does. Is then there's this really big view, and there's these forces that are playing out in the big picture. Do you know what I'm saying? And they are affected by those. And we talk about, you know, the astrology and how we're touched by the planets and the formation of the planets. But the planets are also influenced by, you know, sort of the God play. You know what I'm saying? The big war that's happening. We're experiencing these little wars, right? So all of this is happening in the play of good and bad, light and dark. But mostly we play out the play or the dance of interconnectedness in relationships. And that's where it often shows up. And in relationship, the gift is to experience a love, the true love, in a way that in our normal daily life, you know, going to work and coming home and cooking food and doing the dishes, we usually don't get to experience unless you wake up as Rumi. You know, I love the Farsi language. It did something. It came through and affected and opened a love that just hadn't been conscious yet. I love that. So in relationship, we get to experience this amplified love It's the human experience of love until you begin to open up to that you are love. You're made up of love. The air is love. The sun is love. The whole thing is love, pouring itself, reforming itself, dissolving itself, dancing in itself, It's just extraordinary. So in relationship, then you get to experience that. And then always, I've never seen an exception, maybe there is, it brings forward where you're not free. It brings forward your fears. It brings forward your background of defense and memory of when you were too vulnerable and raw and you were raked open and, and so you've learned all sorts of compensating behaviors and defenses and they come from wisdom, right? You've developed it because that's what you required at the time. But now here you are, probably in the adult body, and those defenses are long, they're just not needed anymore. They're not required. It isn't appropriate to the moment. But we don't know that because there's all these storage systems of, protecting ourselves. And if we do this, then we'll be hurt or annihilated or, abandoned or, whatever it is. Not deserved, criticized, all of that. So the relationship then, instead of this real groovy, juicy love, then ends up being a reflector of your deepest wounds. And so when you start out, and I'll speak of my own rhythms, then you blame the other. Right, they're doing this to me, and if they would just change, it would be different, and whatever you've learned to do to block the other, to protect yourself. It's really all quite innocent. So you've run through a couple of husbands or a couple of wives, and you have more lovers, and you have this, and you have that, and then you start to realize, what was the constancy here? Right, there was one player that played the same trip over and over and over and over again, right? Or you may try to get out of that, and not be in relationship. But you'll find it then with the ashram member or the monastery member or, your teacher. We play that out with our teachers. So if you're lucky, and Nate and I were lucky, we were old enough, which was helpful for us anyway, and we also realized that we loved each other so deeply and so wholly that we were willing to go through the pain that was here. It wasn't his fault, and it wasn't my fault. It was just layers of protection that was being touched. And it's like you have a really deep wound and you go, don't, that hurts, stay away. And then you'll do whatever it requires for you to keep that person at bay. We came onto this book, maybe, I can't remember it exactly, John Wellwood. And he's you probably know about him, he's a Buddhist practitioner and a therapist. I think he's gone now, I think he's dead. But it was to go through the wounded heart. And that was the first time that either one of us actually wanted to, because before it was just like, oh God, it's not worth it. Adios, see you later. And I'll try it again with someone else. Well, guess what? Kind of the same trip would happen again. So anyway, we read that together and we worked that together. And it was really very, very powerful. So then the interconnected, and the more we open to our own nature, the more we let go of all of the identities and defenses and compensations and all of that. Dross, I like that word. It's just dross, build up, dross. then the more the interconnected actually became just the constancy. And that didn't mean you could say, this doesn't work for me. But you say it with a clarity and an okayness, rather than, if you would just do this, then I would be happy forever and I wouldn't hurt anymore. Because that's what we're really saying. So when you take that back, this is a defense, and it was built up because I was very deeply hurt. Child, karma, God knows what. We've done everything, been everything. And so when you start to see that it is up to be free, it's presenting itself so you can be free of it. That is an act of love. It's tough love. It's hard love sometimes. But it's an act of love. It's here, sweetheart. Just look at this. This is a memory from the past. It no longer exists. It just doesn't exist. But it's still held. It's crystallized somewhere in your mind-body structure. And so then it's right here. And you can either see it and be with it, or you can put up another protection and another layer. It's like a callus, right? You just build up a callus. And then there's a certain point where you don't feel that interconnection really to anybody or anything. So the gift, the love of presenting itself, then opens the recognition that it's being triggered by another person. And you don't take abuse. And, if you're in an abusive relationship, you might look at that, of why that's in your life. It's not your fault. I don't mean that. But why do you deserve that? But the other is it dawns. Guess what? Guess who it belongs to? One of the great gifts of the thousands and millions of gifts that my teacher gave me was that. He just said, take it back, and you'll be free. So then you begin to realize, well, how is it that I can be with someone that disagrees with me that I have no real connection with? Right? That can be your neighbor, that can be politics, that can be race, that can be, whatever dance that we take. And so again, make your life your practice. And it's still going on. I practice it pretty diligently and fail over and over and over. But when I'm with someone, I open, I feel that clarity, that sameness, that nourishment that I'm receiving from my nature, that this person also is the same and is nourished and created from that same source. It's the kinship. And so when I am with someone, this opens and touches that is the same within them. And they may look different from me, they may act different from me, they may believe different from me, but that this is the same. And I practice that a lot. And I fail a lot. The interconnection. To be the interconnection. And for me, I'm pretty wired up energetically, and so I use that energetic. I can feel the air here, the air, and there, all one field of energy. And it's amazing how people respond. They may not know that there's someone really deeply, intimately connecting, but something in the air is different, right? You know what I'm saying. So it's not only relationships, But then it starts to move out into the world, the earth. And, the relationship to the animals and to the birds and to the grass and to the mountains and to the sky and to, it's this exquisite reflecting, almost making love with itself. It has that kind of that quality. It's the essence that is in the stream as it flows. It's the essence that pours forth from the sun. It's the essence that rises up from the earth. Our nature is beauty. No matter what it's bringing forth, it's formed, it comes out of beauty, and it's formed as beauty, and it expresses through. I think that is extraordinarily important right now, that we practice it. Because then true compassion comes out of that. It's not a contrived, practiced compassion. It's the reality of the interconnectedness. The interconnectedness is made up of compassion. And if there's ever a time that we need compassion, it's now. We really, 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 what we're pouring into the planet is stay awake to what you're pouring into the planet. Because she needs each and every one of us to love and to see and to experience ourselves. And then we won't continue just this madness of destruction that we've been on for thousands of years, really. The most vital and important at this particular time upon the planet is compassion, the interconnectedness, and that we are made up and bound and held and permeated and formed by love.